What's up, guys? Mr. Fetty here. Today's gonna be another episode of Weirdo Vlogs, and for this episode, it's gonna be about which show that was still in development at Glitch Productions is gonna be the new The Amazing Digital Circus. So, as you may know, The Amazing Digital Circus is gonna end with the ninth episode like this summer, which is June 19th. If it's gonna release like a earlier in theaters, like around like beginning of June, which that could be pretty much a bad idea since it could like lead to like lots of spoilers and lots of lots of stuff that's gonna be a PR nightmare. Like remember the House and Hotel season 2 theater release? Yeah, that's gonna be the same thing for the last episode of The Amazing Digital Circus, which according to the runtime, it's gonna be like roughly almost an hour long. So this is like the biggest episode in the series, and yeah, I'm very excited about the final episode of the Amazing Digital Circus, since not all indie shows gonna last long unless your name is the Helliver, since there's gonna be more seasons, and then after that there's nothing left for the Helliverse, and it's pretty much will be put to rest afterwards. So yeah. And now for which shows are still in development that's going to become The Amazing Digital Circus after this show ends. Well, there's like so far only three, since they're they're not as big as this show, but there's like the possibility that one of them is most likely to be the Amazing Digital Circus. So let's do this. Okay, first up is Game Oververse, which it's a new series made by I think one of the people at Game Grumps. I think it's Robert Ross. And as for the possibility of this show becoming a new Amazing Digital Circus, somewhat low, since it's gonna be possibly gonna be being overshadowed by two other shows I'm gonna talk about later. But yeah, I can see this as like the new Captain N glitch text, I think that's what it's called, and Pibby. Remember that one show that was didn't like get off the ground and pretty much been canceled? Yeah, I can see it as like a mixture of those three shows, where it's gonna be like kind of like a similar tone as Pibby, and with a little bit of glitch text and Captain N, which I'm definitely very excited about it and intrigued too. But I'm gonna wait until like the pilot episodes drop around like in 2 months, which yeah, there wasn't like any promotional stuff on like the Glitch Productions social media sites, since they only focus on like the trying to hype up the final episode of the Amazing Digital Circus, which I think that's reasonable. So yeah. So Game Oververse, yes, by the premise and the concept, very intriguing, and hopefully it's actually a pretty good show when that pilot episode drops in 2 months. So yeah. All right. Next show that's most likely to become the new Amazing Digital Circus. Okay. Next up is Knights of Guinevere, which a new gritty edgy Disney type of show that's gonna be created by the creator of the Owl House, Donna Terrence, and alongside like I think two other people that worked on the Owl House. Yeah, I don't know if this has like potential to become the new Amazing Digital Circus whenever like the next episode is gonna drop, possibly around Halloween, which will be fitting since it's a horror show, and Donna Terrence is a horror type of fan, which I can appreciate her, since she can she can do good with like making like a horror animated film if she planned to do one someday. But yeah, I think this is gonna be I can see potential in it being like the new Amazing Digital Circus when the new episode drops around like Halloween. But by that pilot, this is possibly gonna be straight away all the younger audience, since this is like supposed to be like a more edgier Disney type of show, which yeah, it's basically just parodying anything Disney related, and it's made by the creator of the Owl House, which does a Disney property. So yeah, I'll just wait until like the new episode drops and see if this has potential to become the new The Amazing Digital Circus. So yeah. All right, now for the last one. The Gaslights District. Yeah, this has a high chance of becoming the new Amazing Digital Circus, even through it's also another edgy type of show that doesn't like have the summer tone as the Amazing Digital Circus, which is like brightly colorful, but with some surprisingly dark stuff. Especially like by the last half of the eighth episode, which that was like Brave Little Toaster type of horror. Like, damn, Glitch Productions and Gooseworks wants to edge up the dark stuff in that show, and I pretty much bit 50-50 if this show is gonna rivaling against the edgy stuff that was in the Major Zero Circus, but some certain scenes. Stat and Knights of Guinevere, yeah, they're kind of like more like dark shows for teens and adults. While Game of Reverse, which Infrared might end up being dark, but it could be like a bit have a chance of being like the Major Digital Circus, but don't know if that's gonna happen because there's like many people just like more hype on this and Knights of Guinevere over Game of Reverse, which that's kind of reasonable. So yeah, you know hopefully we'll whenever the new episode the Gaslight District might drop, possibly like around like December, like 2 months after Knights of Guinevere new episode of that show that just dropped, possibly around October. Yeah, hopefully there's like something interesting that could make it like the Amazing Digital Circus. But yeah, even for the pilot episodes where both this and Knights of Guinevere are very successful, but they're not the Amazing Digital Circus type of success, but they did pretty good. So yeah, I'm just like kind of excited about what comes next for this show alongside Knights of Guinevere. Even for the pilot episode, almost felt like a short film. Even for there's gonna be more like in the new couple episodes like later this year and next year. So I'll just wait. So yeah. All right. So let's just wrap this up already. So yeah, I'm sure that one of these upcoming shows that so far they're getting pilots except for Game Overs, which doesn't come out until like May 2026. But best luck for one of them. Like, well, possibly get the most attention, possibly become the new Amazing Digital Circus. Pomni, so is the other circus crew. It's fun while it lasted because I think that neither, you know, the main heroes of As a Guinevere or the main characters of Gaslight's District might take the torch on becoming a new Amazing Digital Circus, unless it's Game Over, which that'll be surprising. So, yeah. All right, so I just hope you guys enjoyed this rather short Weirdo Vlogs episode. So, yeah, like and comment this video and subscribe more content. So this is Mr. Freddy here, and I hope you have a very good day. So, bye.